Hello everybody, it's so good to be back. Before I went on a little break, I invited questions on my community tab. I made a post there inviting questions, and I did say specifically that I wanted questions related to living in Australia as opposed to migrating to Australia, but who was I kidding? Trying to encourage people not to ask questions about migration, because I still got some questions in relation to migration, and that is completely fine. But yeah, this is the video where we get to answer those questions. I want you to also keep in mind, okay, my disclaimer still stands that I am not a migration agent. I am not a recruitment agent. I am not any kind of agent. Even more so now than before, I don't follow immigration updates anymore, which is why I said in the first place that I was only looking to answer questions related to living in Australia. I have not been following migration updates since the last big change came into the immigration scene that was announced in December of last year. And I did make a video about those changes. I have not really gone back into the immigration website to check on anything. Of course, every once in a while, something crosses my radar in relation to some new change that has been rolled out in accordance with the review that was announced in December. Every once in a while, something just pops up and somehow I get to see it, not because I am looking for it. Why I am saying that is so that you keep in mind that for those of you who have asked me immigration-related questions, my answers might not be accurate. And I will still be pointing you back to doing your own research and your own findings, unfortunately. Because when it comes to immigration, things change all the time. And so you always need to be mindful of the currency of the information you are getting, depending on the source where you're getting it from. So if you're just relying on YouTube videos like mine, I don't think you're doing the right thing. That's not the right strategy. You need to be reading the immigration website. Anyways, let's get into the questions. The very first question is from Kemi's vlog. So Kemi, you said, "Hello Chioma, please, I need your honest opinion. With the rate of inflation rapidly increasing, is Australia still worth migrating to in 2024 and years to come?" Well, that's a good question, and one that, being not an economist, obviously I can't give you any very detailed or technical answer, but my understanding is that inflation, the rising cost of living, is not happening only in Australia. So Australia is not alone in that experience of people struggling under increased cost of living and inflation. Okay, Australia is not alone. I think it's a global phenomenon at this point. And so on that basis, I can only go by the facts of what it means to live in Australia in 2024 and beyond. So it is still a fact that Australia happens to be a country with one of the highest minimum wages. Okay, so that is still a fact. It is still a fact that lots of cities in Australia consistently rank as most livable cities in the world, whatever that means. Okay, but it is also a fact that Australia is an expensive place to live in. But even then, there are levels to this thing, as I always say. Sydney is more expensive than Brisbane. Brisbane is more expensive than Adelaide. So again, levels. And even here in Sydney, it depends on the suburb where you live. This is an encouragement for you to go a little further in your research. Don't just look at surface level things. You want to be focusing your research on where you want to live, how much it is going to cost to educate your children, what kind of education you want for your children. Do you want them to attend public school versus private school? It has to come down to those individual elements of living here, and then you decide for yourself whether it is still worth your while to consider Australia as a worthy destination for relocation, if that is what you want to do. As tough as things are, I don't regret living here. I don't feel like life is unmanageable. And for most other people around me, that is what I see. Obviously, I am not in people's houses to know what their exact financial situation is, but I see that people are still trooping on, people are still managing fine. Australia also happens to have a robust economy. And yes, inflation is biting, it is pinching everybody, regardless of the country that they live in. And I don't think Australia is doing too bad. Next question is from, is that Ida or Ida Ezala? I believe that's an Igbo name. Okay, but if it is not an Igbo name, forgive me for pronouncing it like an Igbo name. Anyways, you said your husband has got a job offer in Perth. Congratulations on that. He's an electrical engineer. The salary is $50 an hour. We are planning to come together with our 3 kids. Can this salary be enough for a family of 5? I am a web developer. Will my husband's salary take care of our basic needs before I get a job? There are some aspects to this question that are kind of related to my answer to the previous question. So $50 an hour on the face of it doesn't sound like a bad salary. But I am also kind of mindful of where this question is coming from, because you're saying it's not just your husband, it's yourself and 3 children in tow. So some of the questions you should be asking yourself would be, again, the kids' education. Are they of school age, which means they must be enrolled in school? And if they are of school age, what will be most viable for your family situation, for them to be enrolled in public school or in private school? And also the visa that your husband is coming into Australia on, does it offer fee waivers for children of school age in public school? If I'm speaking on very general terms, Australia does not offer free education, okay? It would depend on your residency status. So if you're a permanent resident, a citizen, or you're on some other visa, maybe a temporary visa that allows you to access fee waivers for your kids in public school. So it will depend on that, okay? If you're coming in on a temporary visa where you cannot access any of these fee waivers, it means that you have to pay international fees for your kids as well. So that's where you need to factor in whether the salary your husband will be earning will be enough to look after the kids' education if they were paying as international students. Beyond all of that, you also want to find out how much it will cost you to rent a place in Perth, and what kind of place will you be renting? Will you be renting an apartment, which is usually cheaper than renting houses? And where exactly in Perth? Because it also depends on the location. So these are the things that will help you to understand your financial situation a little better. I might not be in a position to tell you yes or no. I can't give you a yes or no answer that $50 will be enough or it won't be enough. It just depends on your family composition, your family's needs. You need to drill down on your research a little bit more. And I can tell from your question as well that you are a web developer, and it sounds like you will also be looking for a job when you come in. So I understand the uncertainty of what will happen before you get a job. To get you started, I actually have some videos on this channel that I believe you will find helpful. I have made a video here detailing the cost of living for my family, which is a family of 4. I know that yours is a family of 5, but it might give you an idea. Also keep in mind that that video was from the perspective of living in Sydney, which is quite expensive, more expensive than living in Perth. But of course, finding information about how much rentals cost in Perth is not a difficult thing, okay? A very simple, quick Google search can give you that information. But of course, if you watch that video, then it will give you an idea, a rough idea of what you should be looking at. You also want to decide whether you want to buy a car as soon as you come in, or whether you can manage a little while just using public transportation before you get a car, and if that will be cheaper for you. So do your research, and then you will be able to have a better idea how much that money will stretch for you and your family. I hope that helps. I'm going to leave relevant links in the description to some of those videos I have made in the past, but you can also access those videos by going into my vlogs and chit chat playlist. I believe just by the thumbnail and the title, you will be able to tell whether the subject of that video will be relevant to your query. Okay, so moving on to the next question, which is from Kinte, Lamin Kinte. You said, I am currently studying in Malaysia, but my sister wants to help me to migrate to Australia. She has permanent residency and the husband got citizenship. What would be the easiest way for me to move to Australia? Well, I get a lot of questions about, easiest way, fastest way, and all of that. And my usual response to that question is There is not such a thing as easiest or fastest, okay? All these things are relative to your particular situation and circumstance. There are different types of visas to bring you into Australia. And as long as you meet the requirements for a particular visa pathway, that becomes your easiest pathway, okay? Because if you don't meet the requirements of a visa, you will find it difficult to come in under that visa just because you can't provide documents to back up any claims to meet the requirements for that visa. So easiest, fastest, all these things are dependent on the requirements that you meet. Now, I know that you've mentioned the residency status of your sister and her husband. And I also know that there is some kind of misconception about people being able to invite family members over just on the basis of them having permanent residency or citizenship. It doesn't quite work that way in Australia, okay? Every primary visa applicant has to meet requirements for themselves for the particular visa that they are coming on. And the fact that your family member or relative who lives in Australia has a more stable residency status in Australia, in most cases doesn't really translate to much in terms of whether it can help you to come into Australia. I know that for certain visas like the student visa, if you wanted your family member to stand in as a sponsor for you in relation to meeting the proof of funds requirements, then yes, there might be conditions where they can prove their sponsorship of you, where they can show bank statements to prove that they are sponsoring your education. But in relation to all the other requirements, for instance, the GTE requirements, or as they call it now, the genuine student test, you, the primary applicant, the primary visa applicant, you still need to meet that condition for your own self. It will have nothing to do with whether your sister or your brother, your uncle, your mother, your father lives in Australia and they are citizens or permanent residents. It really doesn't matter. So there is no such a thing as easiest or fastest. The easiest and the fastest would depend on what visa requirements you meet. Now, if you are after information regarding the different visas that can bring you into Australia, the most popular ones that bring most people into Australia, I am going to leave a link in the description box to a video that explains the most popular visa options to Australia. So I would encourage you to watch that video, but beyond that, go on and read the immigration website so that you see the specific requirements for each of those visas and decide for yourself which one most suits your situation. I hope that answers your question. So moving on to the next one. Next question is from, let me click on that name so I can read it properly. Esosa Timothy. Yeah. And Essay, you said, hello, Chioma, please, is it viable to come through the 482 visa? And how easy is it to get a job from outside Australia? I am an electric my tongue is not working. I am an electrician here in Nigeria, hoping to find a job in Australia. Okay, so first things first, yes, the 482 visa is still a viable visa option. It has not been scrapped. It is still in operation, still valid. In terms of viability, first of all, I want you to know, and this is on a general note, if you want to take advantage of any of the skilled migration visas to Australia, you must be consulting the skilled occupation list. Find out whether your occupation is on that list. And then you also want to find out the visa options attached to that occupation. And you can get all of this information on the skilled occupation list. Beyond that, you want to find out for each of those visa types attached to that occupation, what are the requirements? It is important that you know what the requirements are, because even if you were to find an employer that is willing to sponsor you in that occupation, they will also be looking at whether you meet those requirements. So if those requirements require things like licensing or some kind of special registration or certification, especially in the case of trade qualifications and trade occupations, you want to make sure that you meet those standards. Now, for electricians, what I know, and this is very rudimentary knowledge, which by the way might not even be accurate, but the last time I checked, okay, there are specific trade qualifications or trade certifications you must have in some of the trade occupations here in Australia. Now, coming from Nigeria, I don't believe you have those. So I guess the first thing would be for you to find out how you can obtain those certifications. Now, what I have observed that a lot of people do is to come in here to study towards those occupations here in Australia, because that way you end up with the qualifications and any other certifications that are required from you post graduation. Some of these occupations might also require some kind of apprenticeship. Again, I am only giving you what I know from my observations. They might not be completely accurate, but what I am saying here is that it is very important for you to find out the specific requirements for your occupation before you start asking, okay, what visa will bring me? Will I be able to find an employer? Because chances are, if you can prove that you meet those requirements, then it gives you a better chance to be considered by an employer here. If I am going specifically by the electrician occupation, I have not really seen anything to indicate that employers are looking for electricians from overseas. I am not saying that this is the case specifically. I'm just saying that I haven't seen anything like that. I haven't seen or heard about anyone who got employer sponsorship as an electrician from Nigeria. I haven't seen even one person. That is what you need to be researching on your own. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it there. Also know that the 482 visa, it sounds like you already know this anyways, but the 482 visa requires that you find an employer who is willing to sponsor you first before you even apply for the visa. So I'm not sure that I addressed that question the way you would have wanted me to address it, but I really can't speak to something that I don't know much about. Okay, so next question is from Nature's Therapy. Nature's Therapy, I have seen your comments. I see a lot of your comments under my videos. So first of all, thank you for all of your support. Your question is in relation to seeking asylum in Australia, and you're asking, what does the law say, and is it the same as a protection visa? Listen, unfortunately, I can't speak about this topic. I don't have any expertise at all when it comes to protection visas, humanitarian visas. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, unfortunately, I don't really follow immigration news anymore. I don't read the immigration website anymore. So I wasn't really able to get any information on this. And what I also understand about humanitarian and protection visas is that they are quite complex. These are the kind of things that I would encourage you to be speaking to an expert in the field, maybe a registered migration agent or a migration lawyer. Unfortunately, I can't recommend any to you because I have never used any. I always say that on this channel, so I can't even point you in the direction of any particular person to speak to in relation to seeking asylum in Australia. Next question is from, who was that from again? It was from Linda. How are you, Linda? I hope you're settling in well. Anyways, Linda, you said, what is your opinion on the status of the 485 visa? I am 40 years old doing Masters of Social Work. I really do not know what to think of the current visa changes. Well, that makes two of us, Linda. That makes many of us actually, because you're not the only one asking this question. Again, I wish I knew. I wish I had a definitive answer. I wish I knew more about this, but the fact is that I don't. For those of you who don't know, there is an age restriction that is being imposed on the 485 visa, and it actually came into effect from the 1st of July this year, which has passed, right? So the proposal was that student visa holders above the age of 35 would not be able to access the 485 visa, which is the postgraduate visa, upon graduation. So that was the proposal, and that proposal was adopted, and it has now been implemented from the 1st of July. What I don't know, and I guess this is the question on most people's lips, is whether this new change affects people who are already studying in Australia before this new legislation came into effect. So does it affect people who were already studying before the 1st of July? Or is that only going to apply to new student visa grants from the 1st of July? That's a big question. I don't know the answer to that. So I understand that at 40 years old, there's some uncertainty there. And again, I really do not know much about what is happening. However, if I may offer some hope, it does sound like the entire, not just this particular change, but a lot of the changes announced in relation to the student visa in particular, those changes are beginning to show some impact on Australian universities, which, as we know, rely quite heavily on income from international student enrollments. Okay, so it's beginning to hit them really hard and hit them in a place that matters, which is the purse strings. Apart from the loss of income to universities, there's also been an increased rate of visa rejections, student visa rejections, I mean. And this also, in a roundabout way, affects university ratings here as well. The more student visa rejections a university records, the more it affects their ranking, and they don't want their rankings to drop. So I don't know if this would mean that at some point people will be coming together to protest or to seek for some kind of review of these changes. I don't know if that is what it would mean, but it would seem as though fingers are pointing in the direction of an impending review, because for universities, this is not very sustainable. We can only wait and see. That's all I can say, unfortunately, Linda. I just hope that the rest of your studies go well and that this change does not affect you, or that by the time you're done with your studies, there's been some kind of review that considers people in your particular situation. I wish you all the best. Okay, we move on to the next question, which is from Sultan. Sultan, you said, hope you're doing well. I am. I hope you are too. I have applied for Australia student visa twice, but got rejections on Migration Act. Now I am doing Bachelor of Nursing and I want to apply again for Australia after my nursing graduation. What is your advice regarding this? Your response will be highly appreciated. I'm so sorry to hear, first of all, about two visa rejections. That can be really heartbreaking. What I am hearing is that you're now studying towards a Bachelor of Nursing, possibly outside of Australia, right? With the intention of applying to come to Australia when you're fully qualified as a nurse. Well, there are skilled migration visas that are available for people who are suitably qualified as nurses. So you might want to look at one of the skilled migration visas. There's the 190, the 189. There is also the 482 visa, which is related to employer sponsorship. So yes, you will have to look at those, look at the requirements. I know that there are licensing requirements, registration requirements for nurses here in Australia. So even after you graduate, you would need to meet those requirements to be able to access or take advantage of those visa options that I have mentioned. But yes, there are visa options, especially for nurses, as of the time I am making this video, except of course something changes before you finish your studies. But just make sure that you continue to keep abreast of any change coming into the immigration space, especially any change that potentially affects you as a nurse. So I wish you all the best with your studies, and I hope that one of these pathways favors you. Good luck with everything. All right, let's move on to the next question. Hello, Chioma. My question is, and this is from Zipporah. Please, can you do a video on how long do I have to wait for my assessment to come out from Vetasis? I mean, how many days, weeks, or months? Thank you. Okay, Zipporah, first of all, I don't work for Vetasis. There is no way that I can answer this question. Skills assessments will be dependent on, amongst other things, very basic factors like workload. Okay, so if they are quite slammed at the moment and they're getting a record number of applications, then it just stands to reason that it will take a little longer for everyone to get an outcome, right? So that's more a problem to do with internal operations that nobody can answer. I can't answer that. When I did my skills assessment, I only had to wait about 2 to 3 weeks before I got an outcome. But still, from the same assessing authority, I've had people who have waited 1 whole year. I've seen people who have waited 6 months for their own outcomes. So it depends on a lot of factors. One very common one is just caseload. I hope the wait is not much longer for you. Next question is from, let me click on that name so I don't mispronounce things. Next question is from Yulia. And Yulia, you said, no questions. I just want to say, oh, it wasn't even a question. I just want to say you are amazing and very inspiring. Wish your family the best. Thank you so much, Yulia. You are amazing as well for continuing to support me here. I appreciate you. Okay. I believe I have actually come to the end of the questions that you sent me. I am hoping that you found this video useful and you got some value out of it. I know that some of the questions did not have the kind of response that you would have wanted, but I prefer to be honest and tell you what I know, what I don't know. I would always encourage you to, first of all, continue to stay on top of the updates as they are rolled out. And the best place for you to be getting the right information, the most up-to-date information, is still the Australian immigration website. So it's the Home Affairs website. It's going to pop up on the screen right here. So make sure you're getting all your information from there. And if you require more assistance, it is best that you speak to a migration agent. You can find one on the Omara website. So you go into that website, at least you can be sure that any migration agent listed on there has got the necessary registrations to be able to provide migration advice for Australia. So that will be my encouragement to you if you're still needing more assistance, more one-on-one support in your Australian migration journey. I wish you all the best and thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up before you go, and I will see you again in my next one. Bye bye.